After Russia's retreat from Kherson of Ukraine, Putin still has not made any type of a declaration. Kyiv and the White House see an apocalypse coming. Special CIA mission has been sped up, and there are fears that Ukraine will receive some kind of a crushing blow from Russia. So they don't know what's happening because Putin has not come to say anything. We are in 5 minutes before midnight of using Russian weapons of WMDs. Ukraine has entered a very critical orbit, with the Americans being forced to meet Russian high-ranking officials on Turkish soil in order to warn the Kremlin at the highest level about the consequences of using, of course, nuclear on Ukraine. Initially, the Kremlin did not confirm the talks with the US in Ankara. Ankara is the capital of Turkey. But a little while ago, there was an official announcement. Again, it wasn't Putin, it was somebody else. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov responded to a question from journalists confirming the meeting. He said, yes, it's true. Such negotiations took place. It was an initiative of the American side. Now, we don't know who is controlling the Kremlin. Is it still Putin? Or is it the generals that made a coup to remove him? So, Peskov emphasized the phrase, it was the initiative of the American side, with the implication that confirmation of the reason for the meeting came a while ago from Washington. This is the first face-to-face high-level diplomatic contact between the US and Russia since last January's meeting between Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his American counterpart Antony Blinken that took place in Geneva. It's an indisputable fact that the meeting took place 48 hours after the revelation of Russia's use of an electromagnetic weapon and Dmitry Medvedev's threat to use weapons of mass destruction. So apparently the Americans have enough information pointing in this direction, and this may also explain the reason for the withdrawal of the Russians from Kherson. So we know that NATO members speak of shock and awe. Russia, they think, will fry Ukraine with electromagnetic pulse. Now, perhaps the Russian general staff is planning a strike with a tactical nuclear weapon that will cause an EMP, and it will take out the Ukrainian forces behind Kherson, example at their base in Kyiv and Odessa. These are theories, of course. So this gave Moscow an opportunity to counterattack in Kherson and Odessa, for example, from Transnistria, assuming they'd get sufficient forces there in time. Now, what Russian media reports is this. The Kommersant newspaper wrote that talks are underway in Ankara between Russia and American delegations. The director of the Foreign Intelligence Service, SVR, Sergei Naryshkin, represented Russia. Turkish authorities have not made any official comments. The Turkish channel NTV cited sources in the Turkish Special Services, speculating that the meeting could be important in establishing lines of communication between Russia and the United States. The Russian newspaper Kommersant reported that the talks between the Kremlin and Washington were about the war in Ukraine, but a U.S. official denied this, saying that a central topic of the talks were the consequences of any use of nuclear weapons by Russia. So it didn't talk about the war, but by the use of nuclear. Now, initially, I'm translating this from Greek for you. Initially, the Kremlin, when asked about the Kommersant report, said it was unable to confirm or deny it. Russia's SVR agency did not respond to a request for comment. But later, the Kremlin confirmed the secret meeting of the heads of the Russian and U.S. intelligence services in the Turkish capital of Ankara. Kommersant did not go into detail about the purpose of the talks, but reports that the meeting was not publicly announced in advance. Kommersant did not name the members of the American delegation. Naryshkin's counterpart in office is CIA Director Bill Burns, whom Joe Biden sent to Moscow in November 2021, in an effort to dissuade Vladimir Putin from the then-planned invasion of Ukraine. Well, that didn't work. The White House confirmed a while ago. The Americans also confirmed the meeting. CIA Director William Burns is in Alaska to hold talks with the head of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Agency and to deliver a message about the consequences of a Russian use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine, White House officials said. The U.S. official said Burns, a former U.S. ambassador to Russia, would not conduct any kind of negotiations with Naryshkin. Ukraine was informed in advance of Burns' trip to Turkey. The official added, Burns will not discuss any kind of settlement to the war in Ukraine, but will deliver a message about the consequences of Russia's use of nuclear weapons, he said. He is not conducting any kind of negotiations. He's not discussing settling the war in Ukraine, the official said, speaking on condition of anonymity, adding that Burns would also be the issue of Americans detained in, talk about the issue of Americans detained in Russia. So they're not talking about stopping the war in Ukraine. They're just talking about what weapons not to use. This is bad news, obviously. Obviously, it's not the wish of the triune God that people have war with each other. It's the other one that wants war. Now, U.S. urges Kyiv for realistic demands. The White House confirmed last week that National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has been in telephone contact with his Russian counterparts since the start of the war in Ukraine in an effort to prevent it from escalating. The alleged meeting between Russians and Americans on Turkish soil comes after reports that the U.S. officials are pressuring Ukraine to compromise with Russia to end the war. The Wall Street Journal reported on Sunday that Sullivan had told Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to adopt realistic demands in negotiations, including revising his public claim to return annexed Crimea. Sullivan denied last week that he's pressuring Ukraine, repeating what the Biden administration says, that he will not discuss anything about Ukraine without Ukraine. U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff Mark Milley last week called on Russia and Ukraine to use the expected reduction in military operations over the winter to explore diplomatic solutions to the war. Zelensky and other Ukrainian officials say any deal should include Russia's withdrawal from all occupied territories, including Crimea. Well, Russia is never going to do that. Now, Borrell said the start of negotiations with Moscow depends on Kyiv. For his part, the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Policy, Joseph Borrell, said in the morning that starting negotiations with Russia to end the hostilities in Ukraine depends on Ukraine itself, and it's not a decision of the West. When asked by a journalist during his attendance at the meeting of EU foreign ministers in the Belgian capital whether the West is pressuring Kyiv to start peace talks, the Spanish diplomat replied that it's up to Ukraine when it decides to enter the negotiation process with Russia. Ukraine will decide what to do. Our task is to support her, Borrell said. Estimates in diplomatic circles and the media are converging on putting pressure on Kyiv to now accept the start of negotiations with Moscow, having just liberated Kherson. In addition, Borrell noted that today an important decision is the start of the training mission of the Ukrainian army. The shipment will be up and running in a few weeks. It will be in Poland, and many countries are willing to participate in the mission, which will train about 15,000 Ukrainian soldiers. Both the Council of Foreign Ministers and the Council of Defense Ministers will focus on Ukraine, Borrell said. This is from War News 247. I've translated this for you from a Greek article. So as we see, the war is not going to stop, and the West is going to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. Ukraine wants Crimea, period. Russia is not going to give up Crimea, period. So the US and Russia is talking about not escalating, especially not using the use of nuclear. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.